May the blessing of the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, in the Holy Spirit, may it descend upon this host and become for us the body and the blood of Christ. Okay, so this is the replacement video for Thursday class, and it looks like it because of scheduling, there is no day to really do it. So I thought I would just make a video where we take communion and a short something to say about our spirituality and how to navigate Thanksgiving this year. And I normally never talk about the holidays. I'm not someone who thinks in terms of special days. don't do much of that. I don't think that way very much. And so I typically just every year have just basically done the same thing, and not adding anything different because it's a holiday. But this year I thought I better because it's a unique holiday, and there may be some unique problems for some people entering into Thanksgiving this year. And so I thought I would talk about maybe some spiritual strategies for dealing with the holidays. And I don't know how much of it will be relevant to everyone. I don't know about that. But the first thing I thought is, I guess we better start with Jesus. And you remember that I want to make a lot more insight about these things Jesus thinks that are quite profound and that hold a key to so much of living authentically in God's power, and having a day that is the day Jesus intends and not the day that we intend. And one of the things Jesus says in the scriptures is that his judgment is true because he only seeks the will of God. And I really think that is a very profound scripture. And because it gets to, how is it possible that someone with all of the required levels of intelligence that are needed to navigate this life can sometimes come to such poor judgment, and who can sometimes come to such a place of unhealthiness, even though the intellect is working just fine? How is that possible that reason can fail us? And Christianity has a lot to say about reason and intuition and how, being a human being, we are just limited in some ways. We have limits, and that it is impossible for us to know all things, and it is impossible for us to always make the best choices, that there are just some limits where mistakes can and will and must be made, and that is part of being human. But here we have Jesus giving us one of the pieces of advice that I think helps us to make more clearer choices and clearer decisions. And one of them is, I think the core of it is that he says his judgment is true because he only seeks God's will, because he doesn't seek his own will, but he seeks God's will. And I was going to say that entering into this holiday season might be different for some people this year because there is a political divide going on in the country. And then there's also a division in degrees to which people are taking this COVID-19 seriously. And I'm not here to pick sides on any of that. I don't care about that. But it does matter a little because you may be now thrust together or forced to be apart. And there could be resentment and all kinds of things going on within families on this level. I know I spoke to, there's a coffee shop I love to go to, and one of the people that works there is very friendly. And he was talking about how he's spending his Thanksgiving alone, all by himself. And his parents are really hurt. They want him to come see them, but they're 80 years old. They're 80 years old. And he works at a coffee shop where he's exposed to lots of people, and they're at high risk for having a serious problem if they were to contract the virus. So he's not going to see them this year, and they're hurt. They want him to come, but he's not going to protect them. But they're not thinking that way. They don't want him to protect them. They want him to come, and so there's pressure. There's pressure for him to be there, even though he can't find a way to feel right about that within himself. He can't find a way to put his parents at risk in this moment And I'm not saying he's right or wrong. This is just where he's coming from. And so then there's that social pressure from his parents to show up, even though he thinks it's not the best thing to do. And so we're not here trying to navigate and figure out exactly what the right thing is and come up with something we can tell everyone this is the right thing to do. We're not interested in that. But could you now surrender your own will completely, having to do with the holidays? Could you give up what you think is right and what you want to have happen and the way that you want it to unfold? Can you just give that up and turn that over to God completely? Is there enough humility and space in you to be wrong? And not even necessarily to be wrong, but do you have the humility to just set aside your opinions of everything and just genuinely and truly want God's will to be done? You don't know what God's will is yet. You don't know that, and you may not get a vision or a dream telling you. But can you just set aside your bias and your self-will long enough to feel that peace enter and that silence and quiet that enters when you've given up on your own aversions and desires? And that is, I would say, the first key to a healthy holiday season. It's really the first key to anything. It isn't really special or organized towards a holiday. Can you give up your self-will? Are you willing to put aside everything you think, everything you want, and just say, God's will alone be done? If you can't do that, then you are dangerously attached to your own will. And that's okay. We're all at different levels and it's no big deal. If you can't do that, though, then that means you have an agenda that is your agenda for the way things ought to be. And that is a kind of suffering in itself, but it also, according to Jesus, it warps the mind and makes one unable to see God's will in a situation. It makes one's judgment false and inaccurate and untrue to the exact extent that we have an agenda, that our will and what we want for a situation is involved. And we can derive that from what he says. My judgment is always true because I do not seek my own will, but the will of him who sent me. Now, there are other ways for us to be wrong. So we can't, turn everything over to God and say, I only want God's will, and then just say, and now whatever I think is true. Because there are some other things that can get in the way. We have other kinds of limitations. But Jesus is giving us here a big key. So are you willing to enter into prayer and inventory? Have you been pressuring or placing expectations on others this holiday season that is causing tension? And can you let that go? Can you undo that? In the next conversation you have with somebody, can you make an amends for that? And say, whatever is best is what we want. Let's let there be love and goodwill this holiday season. Can you set aside, maybe it's much more subtle than that and much more civilized, but can you set aside your self-will to allow this season to be what it is with the unique circumstances that are involved? Can you do that? If you cannot, I would suggest trying. I would suggest entering into prayer and asking for the maturity to do that. To just let go of all expectations, so whatever the day is really going to be, that can be the perfect day. Rather than having an agenda and a strong opinion about how it needs to look, and then being in resistance to reality because it doesn't look that way. And that makes me want to move into this next little tiny, I don't have a lot to say really, but the next thing I wanted to say is how much the spiritual path is about living in reality rather than living in fantasy. And so we are under special circumstances this year. You may very well be a part of a family that is super interested, that is highly interested in being very careful about the virus. And you yourself may not feel that way about the situation that we're in. You may not feel that degree of carefulness is appropriate, but your whole family does. You could feel left out about that. I know my family, when we decided not to go see our family for Thanksgiving, we're going to just do, my wife and daughter and I, our own Thanksgiving at home. I'm really looking forward to that. I think it's going to be wonderful. I think we can make it beautiful by being in God's power and by being in touch with the Holy Spirit and making it sacred. I think that we can make a very sacred, wonderful Thanksgiving. But my family was willing, and what they were going to do was eat the meal with all the windows open and the doors open and everyone wearing masks except when they're eating. And we were still going to hold Thanksgiving together. My family, that's the degree of care and carefulness that they were going to place on it. But you might have a family like that, and you might think that this is crazy to be so careful about the virus, that it's unnecessary. But can you let go of that judgment? And can you let go of feeling like an outsider, maybe feeling wounded by that or having hurt feelings by that? Can you let that go and just participate in the way your family is doing it? Or vice versa. I know at least one person whose family is not careful at all. They're all going to gather indoors. They're not going to have windows open or doors open. They're not going to be wearing masks, and they're going to spend all day together. And I know some people who are unwilling to enter into that environment. And if that is your position, can you let that be okay? And if you are on either side of it, if you're the family that isn't taking the virus that seriously to take all those measures, can you not treat the person who doesn't come as an outcast? Can you give them the love and the support and the acceptance that you would hope to receive for yourself were you were the shoe on the other foot? Can you offer that to them? See, we don't want to come out of this holiday more wounded. We don't want a day that we've made up and just magically decided is special. We don't want to take that something we intended to make something good out of and make it into an opportunity to create further division or pain or woundedness in others. That's all self-will, and it leads to suffering. And the holidays are an interesting conundrum because for some people they're just a complete delight and a joy and a wonder. And for others, they're a real source of suffering. And so can you lay aside your expectations on that level, whatever those might be, make the decision you feel is best for you and others, and let that be okay. And if someone in your family makes a decision that isn't the decision you would make, can you love and accept them completely without judgment or without hurt feelings or without wounds? And this is what I mean by spirituality. We must be in reality. So this season is different. And things are going to unfold differently. And they're going to unfold in ways that we wouldn't choose or prefer. Do we prefer to live in the fantasy of what we hoped it would be and then be disappointed, angry, or disappointed or angry or wounded or have hurt feelings? Or can we just accept this season is the way it is? Can we just deal with the way things really are and not with our projections onto them? That's the key to this holiday season, I think. And to not put expectations on others, and also to honor our own choices and let it be okay. Whatever we choose to do for the holidays, let that be okay with us, even if others may disagree. Can we just let all of that be all right? And I think we can. But if we don't, then we're in resistance to what is. And there's nothing more insane than being in resistance to what is. Life is a certain way. And to wish it wasn't that way, to the point where it damages our spirituality or our psychological and emotional well-being, it is a form of insanity. That is an insane thing to do. So we have to come to a stark acceptance of what really is. That's reality. Let me live in the reality that is, and not compare it to the fantasy of how I wish it would be. Can I just put that aside? And for this holiday season, can we put that aside and let it be what it is? Just what it really is. And let God's grace and power pour upon what is, and not compare it to a fantasy of what we wish it would be, and then feel pain or sadness or sorrow because of that comparison. You know, if someone is choosing to spend the holidays alone, they can do that in a way that is very healthy and happy, as long as they just let that be what is and not compare it to what could have been. Right? Because there's nothing magic about this day that's coming. There's no inherent energy to it. It just is what it is. And we want to adopt ourselves to what is and not what we wish it could be. Okay, so I think that's, and so one more strategy, a couple of other things I wanted to say. You know, you're always talking to a vast, diverse group. So some people have wonderful families, supporting and loving people. So that's one sort of thing to deal with. You know, really not a whole lot to deal with, more like just something to enjoy. But others, many others, have families that are abusive, judgmental, and divisive. And that may be amplified now in this present political climate, which I would say is quite divisive in the country and dangerous. And I want to do a video on that soon, but I won't talk politics, obviously. But there must be a way to plug into all of this without coming to a genuine dislike of the other, and a divisiveness that has any kind of hatred in it or anger. We must avoid that. That is not Christian. It's not love, and it's poison to our souls. But another strategy for dealing with the holidays for people who have abusive families and maybe who choose not to go see them, but choose to stay home alone, because sometimes being in those situations is more stressful. It doesn't always have to be abuse, you know, there could be just heavy expectations. It could add a lot of stress. Some people don't want that. So they would choose not to be with their family, or they are not allowed to be with family because of COVID. That, you know, there's so many situations going on right now like that. What do you do? I mean, I would say there's a couple of things that you can do, and I'll start with the one I started with. When I got my first spiritual teacher, he had a strong sense that, and I don't share this, that he had an extreme sense of there are no special days of any kind. All days are alike. Something like Paul says in the New Testament, all days are alike, all days are the same. That was where he plugged into life. And I, at that time, happened to have a family that wasn't kind if you went to see them. And so I didn't. And on special days, I didn't go for a while, a number of years. I just didn't really go see my family. I just spent the day alone. And the way that I navigated that was from the advice of my spiritual director, was to undefine the day and realize that the day has no meaning whatsoever except for the meaning that I give it. That there are no special days of any kind. And so when a special day comes up, and just the fact of it being special brings me pain, when any other day could be the same and I don't feel suffering, then I have the power and ability and permission to undefine it and just say it's a day like any other day. And I encourage anyone to do that if that's if that helps you. I encourage you to do it. You can go hiking, right? You can do anything you want on this day. And you don't have to sit around thinking, but it's Thanksgiving and I should be here doing this. Or it should look like that. Because there are no shoulds here. We've made it all up. We've made all this up. And we can unmake it up when it doesn't serve our spirituality and our happiness. So tomorrow, if you're a person who's not going to see family or can't, possibly, it doesn't have to mean anything to you. And don't let it. Just decide right now, it's just a day. And that was for a number of years, that was the approach I took. And then I got married and we have a daughter. And so obviously now I, if possible, in a way that isn't stressful and isn't filled with expectations, I've tried to make every holiday extra special for my daughter. Of course, right? She's coming into this world empty and she has no knowledge of what any of it means. So let's make it the memories of joy, of course. So I'm not rigid about undefining it, but undefining it is a great technique or strategy or perspective to take. It isn't really a special day. It's just a day. And so if you have chosen to spend that day alone or are forced to by the virus, that doesn't have to have any emotional content. There doesn't have to be any negativity or sadness or sorrow about that. It doesn't have to be that way. It's somewhat invented and created by us. It can feel like any other day feels. You have permission for it to just be any other day. Okay, so there's that, and then there's really only one more thing I wanted to talk about, which is, so let's say you are going to see family, and it's possible the family is a little more divided, but it's also possible it's just the same as it's always been, and this present climate hasn't changed anything at all. Both of those are possible. But even within that, it's possible that there is some disorder and dysfunction in the family, and you haven't healed all of your issues from your upbringing. You may still have relationships that are not perfectly smooth. There may still be growth that needs to happen within the family, and you don't need to go in hoping that nothing bad happens at all, no issues come up at all because it's a special day and everyone should be happy. You don't have to do that. You can go in to the holidays thinking, this is an opportunity. It may be many things, but it's possible that I could use this holiday as an opportunity to notice the way in which I react and engage egoically with my family, right? The way in which I withdraw or control, or the way in which I hide, or the way in which I dominate. This could be a great, because, our family of origin is where a lot of our disorder was birthed. And so sometimes being around our family of origin is a really great place to notice where our trouble still lies. And so you can go into this, you're going to have a wonderful day. And if it's a great day, you're going to let it unfold as a great day. You're not going to try to control anything. But if you do have disorder that arises, that's not a failure. That's not an inconvenience. That's not ruining the day unless you react negatively and make a big mess, which we'll hope you don't do. But couldn't this be an opportunity to notice the kinds of disorder that you run with your children? Or the kinds of disorder you run with your parents? Or the kinds of disorder that you run with your siblings? And if that is present for you, it's going to happen. You're going to get triggered. And isn't that wonderful? Isn't that great? Another chance to have these things surfaced and brought to God and healed on another level. So if you think of it, if you go into this holiday season, this day tomorrow, with the notion that your goal in life is to draw closer to God, if you go in with God's will as your goal for tomorrow and not your own will, and since we don't know God's will, that means we're going in completely empty. We're going in with no agenda. We want God's will to be done, and we don't know what that is. So we're just open. We're just open to the moving of the Holy Spirit in the moment. We're just open to what is going to be for that day. And if it's pure joy, then it's pure joy, and we roll with that pure joy. And if it's love, and if it's a sense of connection, whatever it is that might arise, it's okay, because we want God's will to be done, not our own. And even if it brings up seasonal, depression, or that's really not the right language, wounds from your past, wounds from your family, even if that's the case, if you go in not as a victim, not as someone who has expectations and wishes it was very different, if you go in without all of those agendas, and you go in as a person on a spiritual path who's looking for spiritual growth and who has no agenda for how this day has to unfold, then whatever comes your way, no matter what it is, can be an opportunity for learning and for spiritual evolution. And if that's your goal, you're not going to have a disappointing day tomorrow. If you can let go of your will, no matter how the day unfolds, it could be massively tragic or so beautiful there's light in the room, or any combination in between. And if your intent is to grow spiritually, to be a channel for God's love and power, to be open to transformation, and if you've let go of all your self-will and your projections of what the day should be or needs to be, then you can't have a less than spiritual day tomorrow. Okay, one other, this is sort of fragmented, but it's just something I learned years ago, and it's helped me. Sometimes there are unresolved issues with siblings or family. And I think Thanksgiving Day, when everyone has come together to have dinner, is not the time to bring them up. I think, in my mind, I think of the possible exception of when you walk outside together and you two have a great talk. That's fine. But, airing grievances, I don't think Thanksgiving dinner is the day for that, is it? This isn't the time to hash it out with someone, is it? It's probably not the day for that. That's probably reserved for another time, when everyone doesn't have, a goal of having a nice dinner together. So it isn't necessarily the time, it probably isn't the time to solve problems, unless there's just a unique connection and that can be done in a healthy way that doesn't disturb everyone around you. So it also isn't the time to, air out that problem you have with somebody. That's probably not the day for that. So you can't go in with resentment and an agenda there either. So you see how everything I've talked about today, and I probably missed a lot of things that are relevant to people, But it's all solved, isn't it, by what Jesus said? By truly seeking God's will and not your own. And so I don't know, you don't know what tomorrow should be like. You don't know. And since you don't know, you have no expectations. Since you don't know, you're not trying to control. Since you don't know, you're not comparing it to your ideal and being disappointed. Because you've let all that go, because that's all self-will. Because that's all things you think and operate with. And this is why Jesus was so perfectly clear. Because he never sought his human will over his divine will. And for us, that looks like not seeking our own will, but seeking only God's will. Okay, I think that's almost it. The last thing I will say is that to enter into whatever situation you're in, if it is a social gathering of any kind, remember you're a servant of God. And remember that your job is to be a servant of others. And so if there are children involved, then your job is to serve them for that day and to whatever is in your ability and your power to make that a good day for them. And if you're going into any kind of a family gathering, remember that, we are in divided times, drug addiction, alcohol use, depression, a lot of these problems that are sort of like, canaries in the coal mine of social unrest are on the increase. And so you could also go into a situation with the notion of service, with the notion that you would be a channel for God's love and power. And so that after having experienced you for that day, their day is better than having not been with you for that day. You can have that service orientation in mind, and we know that's another key, that Jesus teaches us for being accurate, but also for having a positive influence. If you go in with your will, it's self-will, it's egoic, it's small, it's petty, and it doesn't uplift anyone. But couldn't you go in with the intent, genuine intent, to be of use to God and others? And couldn't you hold that intent? Couldn't you begin tonight in prayer, asking for that? And especially in tomorrow's morning meditation, couldn't you make sure that you're fully awake and alert and genuinely asking to be a source of light for those around you, so that their life may be improved by your existence? Okay, that's everything. So just a couple announcements. So because of scheduling, it didn't seem like it was going to work to do it Wednesday or Friday. So what I thought I would do instead is just do communion and then give the talk. This is basically Thursday class. And then at your convenience, you guys can view this. I know it's going to be 3:30, 4 o'clock before it's posted on Wednesday. So I hope it's in time before Thursday for everybody. But here it is. God bless you all, and thank you very much.